So today I want to talk about something a little interesting. I want to talk about getting better at making music. And that's why I'm sitting here, and that's why there's no Ableton today on the screen. There's no Serum, there's no Vital, there's no samples, there's no time stretching. We're just going to be talking about music production, and sort of the way that music production works, and the way it's all structured. And the reason we're going to talk about that is because if we figure out how the whole thing is structured, then we can figure out how to get better at it. Oh, that's good. That is good. All right, so if you think about the way that music production is structured, the most naive or basic way to conceptualize it is to think of it as all of its component skills, right? You have mixing, you have writing melodies, chord progressions, all that kind of stuff. You have song structure, you have sound design, etc., etc., etc. And these are all sort of more or less separate skills, and presumably, if you're really good at all of these things, you'll be really good at making music. Now, the thesis that I kind of want to hold in this video is that it's actually a little more complicated than that. I think music is very much about sort of embedded skills. So what I mean by that is that the skills that we use in making music all very heavily rely on each other. So let's say, for example, that I totally maxed out my skill of making melodies. I just write melodies all day, every day, and I'm super, super good at it. Every time I write a melody and I show it to someone, they're just blown out of the water because it's so amazing. Let's say I'm making a song now, and I have a little section of the song, and then I move on to the next section, and I start to, write a melody for that because that's what I do. That doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to work out. Even if it's a really good melody on its own, in the bigger picture of the song, it needs to be sort of appropriate. It needs to be similar enough in vibe that it sounds like it's part of the same song, but it also needs to be a little bit different, right? Because if it's the exact same thing, it's just repetitive and it's boring. So in that way, the skill of making melodies by itself is not enough to carry the whole piece, because music isn't just a moment-to-moment experience of different things happening. It's all sort of interconnected, and you can go even further than that and think about, how are all of the different songs on an album connected. So if you think about it in that way, then you start to see that there's actually so many different layers to this. On the very most granular layer, you have these micro skills like doing sound design and writing melodies or constructing chords, those kinds of things. And then you zoom out a bit, and then sound design maybe scales up to something like writing a riff. Constructing chords can turn into chord progressions, giving you a sense of tonality and whatever, a melody to kind of indicate some sort of mood along with the chord progression. And then you have all these components, let's say also some drums, and then you can put that all together, and then you have a section of a song, right? But from there, if you do that once, that's not a piece of music yet. That's just a section of a song, or maybe it's a small part of a section, right? Maybe it's just a riff, and you have a 4-bar loop, and you need to extend that to 16 bars to kind of get one section. So you need to, duplicate that, write variations, keep things fresh. And then you have one section. And then you need to string multiple sections together to make a whole song. And then in some cases, if you so aspire to, you can string multiple songs together to make an album. The point that I'm trying to make here is that it's not just being good at sound design, it's being able to use sound design appropriately to serve sort of the bigger purpose in the song. And this is not just for sound design, but this is for every sort of skill that you can imagine. And when I say that, things quickly get very complex and very overwhelming. If all of these skills need to sort of work together, then, how do you figure that out? What I kind of want to talk about is kind of getting into this mindset of thinking about your own process in that way, thinking about how do all of the different skills that I have work together? Do they work together? Or are you the kind of musician that just, makes a section and makes another section, and they could very well be completely different songs that maybe use the same drums? So that's kind of the goal with this video, is to try to get you to think about these different ways in which the skills that you have interact, and how you can use them together. And this is where sort of the bigger overarching skill comes into play, the big meta skill, if you will. So this is the skill of being able to gauge whether something is appropriate or not, whether it fits in the bigger picture. And this can be from a very small scale of, say, whether your snare fits in with the rest of your drums, to a very large scale, whether a song fits in with. And that skill is sort of difficult to develop, because at least with sound design, I can show you like, hey, you move the filter and the sound becomes squelchy. But with this kind of skill, it's really broad and it's really all-encompassing. So it's something that takes a lot of time to build up, and I want to encourage you to think about it actively, because that is the only way to really learn it, I think. It's also one of those things that I think is extremely individual, You can teach everyone to make a kick drum and then they can put the kick drum in the song. But figuring out how you work as an individual, as a musician, as a producer, that is just something that's very unique to you. So I want to propose some creative strategies, some ideas that you can use, but this is by no means the correct way to get there. What is correct is whatever works for you. So if there's be anything that you feel like, hey, I do this thing and you didn't mention that, drop a comment down below. I think we can all learn from each other in that way. The more of these sort of creative strategies that we aggregate, the higher the chance is that we'll be able to find one that does the trick for us. Right, so the first creative strategy kind of relates to the way in which we listen to music, because I find that as a producer, I listen to my own music in a very, very different way from which I listen to other people's music. Because when I hear my own music, I hear the Ableton project file, I know that behind every sound, I can just, slap on an EQ and change something about it. I can remove a note from the melody if I want to. I can even remove an entire section from the song, so it's very flexible in that sense. I can be hypercritical and I can totally scrutinize it. Whereas with other people's music, you're kind of forced to see it as a whole, because the thing is just up there on Spotify or whatever other service, and you just listen to the whole thing, and if you like it, that's great, then you can listen to it again tomorrow, and if you don't like it, then you just kind of forget about it. And that is a very different way of thinking about music. So what I try to do is I try to get closer to that mindset of what it's like when I listen to other people's music, but when I listen to my own music. So one of the ways to achieve that is to play your music for other people. I find that having someone else uninvolved in the room can sometimes make you hear it through their ears, if that makes sense. And that's just something that really helps me listen to my music in a more objective way. Another thing that I've recently been doing a lot is I've been getting up from my desk. I've just been, working on some neurofunk, so it's really music that's oriented towards, being played in a club or a rave or whatever, dance music basically. And I just play my song and I just kind of go walk around my room and I kind of pretend that I'm at a rave or at a club and I'm hearing this song being played. I'm kind of like, okay, does this make me want to dance? And if it does, then that means that that section that I'm listening to is good, makes me want to dance, so it does the job, right? Of course, not every section of the song is supposed to make you dance. There's breakdowns for a reason, but for the main job, if it makes me want to dance, then that means I'm doing something right. And then I also think about, does this transition feel natural to me? Or am I kind of confused by it? And if I'm confused by it, that means that the two sections where the transition happens, they're not really connected enough. They don't have enough in common. The opposite can also happen. If they have too much in common, it can get boring. The gist of this is that I just kind of try to vibe to my own music and kind of monitor how the music makes me feel, and based on that, I make decisions. Because ultimately, that is also how other people will be listening to my music. And I think an important aspect of music is being able to sort of take your musical ideas and present them to other people. So if you can listen to your own music in the same way that they listen to your music, then that can tell you a lot of valuable stuff about the presentation of your musical ideas. Another good thing that you can do is you can kind of try to reflect on your own music making process. I've done this a lot over the years, and it's led me to some pretty important conclusions about the creative process, at least for me personally. When I was producing for, I don't know, about a year or two, I asked myself, some of the music that I made in this time, I really like, and some of the other music I made, it kind of sucks. So I asked myself, what was it like to make that music that I really like now? And what I found is that if I had fun making the song, then the song tended to age a lot better. It tended to sort of stand the test of time, and even if I look back on it and the production and the mixing is kind of shitty, the song still holds up and it still has a sort of charm. And that is sort of one of the most important realizations I've had over the course of making music, is that it's got to be fun. Because if it's not fun, then it becomes a chore, and then it just becomes something that you're kind of trying to get it over with, And I sincerely believe if you can find the joy in making music, you'll make stuff that's better. And I mean, of course, there's a flip side to this, because if all I cared about was just having fun, then I'd be playing video games all day, and I wouldn't actually be making any music, right? Because there are times when making music is frustrating and you can't figure it out and stuff. And that's all right, but I try to sort of optimize it in such a way that on the long term, I get the highest possible degree of fulfillment out of it, In the moment, it might not be fun to try to mix your song. I know that's frustrating for a lot of people, but in the end, you can be really proud of the end result you've made if it really elevates your song and works out in a cool way. Now, another important strategy, I think, is it can be very valuable to sort of see other people making music. Because, you have all of these sort of skills that need to work together, and you can try to figure that out on your own, but there's so many different ways in which you can put these things together. There's so many different skills involved and different ways in which you could express them that, you're not going to explore it all by yourself. Humans only live for so long. You just simply don't have the time. So what I found quite valuable is working together with other musicians. I mean, really being in the same room and just, working together on something and seeing, oh, what does this person do? How does this guy go about doing this thing? How does this guy go about doing music? And that's, made me realize, for example, that personally, I tend to really work on the loop first, whereas that's not necessarily how you always need to make music. You can just come up with a riff and say, okay, that's the chorus, what is the verse? Right? There's all these different ways in which you can do it, so working together with other musicians can really help. If you don't have people to collaborate with, another thing that can be helpful is, for example, watching live streams. Just generally any sort of situation in which you can watch another musician making music. You'll also sometimes be able to find interviews with your favorite artists, or where they'll kind of talk about their own creative process and what they'll be doing over the course of a day. And you can try to, see how is that different from what I do, and can I try that maybe, and does it work better for me? Let's get back on the topic of having fun again, just for a short minute, because there's a little more stuff that I want to talk about with regards to having fun. I do think that there is some value in doing things with music that are fun, that don't necessarily contribute to some kind of goal that you have. For example, I've talked in the past about I sometimes do a lot of sound design sessions, and especially when I first got into that sort of workflow of doing separate sound design sessions, I was having a lot of fun with that, and a lot of those samples I made never really get used, you know? But it did sort of allow me to develop that skill, and I had fun doing it, and I think that really sort of carried my sound design from complete amateur to, you know, at least presentable. Another thing, hold up, you can just explore other things. About a month ago, I bought this bass guitar. It's secondhand, it's kind of crappy, to be honest, but I've been thinking about buying one for a while, and I have my reasons to be interested in it because I've been exploring, you know, groove and swing a lot recently in my music, and I've also been trying to get better at writing bass lines, so, you know, I figured if I get a bass guitar and I kind of learn to play the instrument, then that'll kind of give me a different perspective on groove and on bass lines, so why not, you know? And of course, it's a whole different way of making music, and there's some great sound design possibilities here too. Let's not, you know, I'm not going to pretend that that isn't also a cool reason for me to get this thing, but, you know, you can just explore because music is so broad, and you don't have to have some kind of end goal or end ambition in mind, you know, because I don't even know what I'm going to learn by learning this instrument. But I'm pretty sure that some of the stuff that I learn will come back in some way, even if I cannot rationally sort of explain to you now because it's simply too much of an unknown for me. Experience has taught me that if you just explore these things, you build up more of a musical understanding from it, and that'll benefit you in the long run no matter what you do. So yeah, there you have it. These are sort of the most important strategies that I can think of in terms of the creative process. So to recap quickly, you know, think about your own workflow. Think about how the different skills that you have work together, because if you figure that out, then that'll give you a better understanding of what you need to work on. Do you need to work on your sound design, or do you need to work on integrating your sound design into writing the song, you know? Another thing is have fun, because if you're not having fun, it's going to be a chore, and fun is one of the best motivators in the world, and it's what makes music such a satisfying hobby that you'll have for the rest of your life. And finally, see how other people do it. See how other people make music and compare it to your own, you know? Why do they do the things they do? Why does it work? You can try it out for yourself. So, there you have it. Those are some of the creative strategies that I like to use to kind of get better at making music, and I would love to hear what your strategies are and if they are any different, because the more of these strategies we can gather in one place, the better of a resource this video will be, and that would be very epic. If you like this video, subscribe, join my Discord server. Also, this was the first time I recorded sort of this talking head style video, and I noticed in the footage when I watched it back that there is some weird flickering going on. I don't know what's happening, man. I just make snares. I hope it's not too big of an issue, but yeah, cheers. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.